again, everyone, and welcome to the 20th episode of the Calamasa Insider Podcast. I am Will Coble, City Manager for the City of Calamasa, and we're just going to get right into it. So, this Friday night, the city hosted its first ever movie in the park. We put Cars on. Good turnout at Summerwind Park. I hope everyone had a great time. I certainly had a great time with my sons. They came with me. One of my sons came in his Lightning McQueen shorts and Crocs, so he was really pumped up for the event. And so a lot of people asked if we're going to be doing another movie this year, and the answer is no, we're not going to do one this year. However, we are planning to do at least one next summer because it was a great hit. I think once the expansion at 4th Street Park, soon to be named Mountain View Park, on the north end of town, I think once that is completed, we may have one movie there. And of course, we had the one movie at Summerwind, just depending on size and the amount of room that we have. We're a little bit more limited on space at 4th Street Park. So that's one of the reasons that it's harder to host a movie in the park there. But if the new expansion allows for it, we certainly are going to consider that. Coming up this Monday, we have a council meeting at 6 p.m. at the Norton Young Love Senior Center. It's this Monday, August 19th. One item that I think is of great interest for the community is the Oak Valley North hearing, so the consideration of a project at the corner of Singleton and Calamasa Boulevard. Just so everyone is clear, that item will be continued. So the hearing will not take place. We're going to open the public hearing and then continue it. And here's the reason why. There is a question as to whether two of the members may participate in the public hearing due to to their proximity to the project, where they live. And so in these situations, generally speaking, if a decision maker lives within 500 feet of a project, they must recuse themselves due to a conflict of interest. Also, again, generally speaking, there are some small, very specific exceptions. If a decision maker lives more than 1,000 feet away from a project, they can participate. So the two council members in question, which are Mayor Davis and Mayor Pro Tem Wendy Hewitt, live farther than 500 feet, but less than 1,000 feet from the project. So in this case, additional analysis must be done because in that range, there are certain things that must be looked at to determine if a conflict of interest exists or not. So after the city attorney's office kind of reviewed the facts, everything there, it was decided that it's best to get guidance from the Fair Political Practices Commission, or FPPC, in the form of an advice letter. And the FPPC is the authoritative agency in the state that monitors the state's conflict of interest laws. And these advice letters are provided by the FPPC staff attorneys who specialize in this area of the law and provide an independent third-party review of the relevant facts of the project and each council member's relative location and property characteristics. So just because, again, they have to make determinations whether the relative location of maybe where the home is located, what impacts the project may have around the project, and whether those impacts will actually come directly to those council members to materially affect their financial position, either positively or negatively. So, because remember, it's not just about, whether conflict of interest is not just about whether a council member can benefit from a project. It's also if it's detrimental to them, right? So, in other words, it's to protect the public and to protect the applicant as well. Because again, as we said before, the applicant is still allowed due process. They're allowed a fair hearing on their project. So we want to make sure that those conflicts don't exist. In these cases, again, when you're looking at 500 to 1,000 feet, it's about a bit of a gray area. So it's best to get the advice of the FPPC. So that's what we're doing. So because of that, in order to provide sufficient time for the FPPC to produce their advice letter, we're continuing the public hearing till September 23rd. So if you plan on attending the public hearing, please mark your calendars for September 23rd. Again, there will be no decision made on this project. And so that's why none of the relevant project documents are included in the agenda packet. They'll be available on the September 23rd agenda. Although the agenda will look very similar to the agenda that was produced for the Planning Commission for this item. A lot of the same information will be included. So if you do want to get kind of a sneak preview of what that may look like, you would look at the last Planning Commission meeting, which took place, I want to say it took place on the 23rd, on July 23rd. I got to look at the dates. I apologize for not being prepared for that. But anyway, you'll be able to find that. If you've been following on the project, you probably saw that anyway. So it'll be very similar to that. Also, we did include letters that were written letters that were directed at the project as of the date of the publication, or the day before the publication of the agenda packet for the August 19th meeting. So if you've written comments, we've already providing those. We will also include those in the September 23rd hearing as well as additional comment letters that we may receive between now and then. So just so everyone is aware, and if you've written your comment after the agenda was published, but before the hearing before the meeting on the 19th, we will provide that to the council as well. But again, all of that will also be provided again to the council, so it's clear, it's transparent, and everything is included for both the council and the public to see. We'll also be having a public hearing on the housing element, and this proposed action is to adopt a state-required update to the general plan's housing element. And the city is required to update the housing element every 8 years. And the last time we updated it was December 16th, 2013. Now, obviously, that's longer than 8 years ago. And staff has been working on updating the housing element since 2020. And there have been numerous reviews done by the California Department of Housing Community Development, which has accounted for the delay. And they keep changing how they look at things. They find additional things that they didn't comment on before that we have to fix. It was an extremely frustrating and inconsistent process, and it was inconsistent even from city to city. And this is something that's actually being looked at by the legislature, because a lot of cities have complained about the inconsistencies that have existed with this process. So that's something that to keep an eye on. The housing element will cover the period of 2021, the year 2021 to 2029, and a key element to getting the housing element approved by HCD was the adoption of the Residential Infill Priority Area Overlay Zone. You'll recall that was something the council considered back in October of 2023. There is a minor adjustment that is needed to the overlay zone for full HCD approval, which involves requiring a minimum density on the Zone 2 area, which allows for apartments. So only one area is designated Zone 2, or the area for apartments. This is along West Avenue L in this vicinity of 7th Street and 7th Place. HCD is requiring the minimum in order to ensure that only high-density housing is available to be built at that particular location. So again, this is a requirement. The law generally allows for that anyway, but I think they just want to make sure that even if the law changes, this space will still be built for high density. Again, if it gets developed, we can only zone for it. We don't build housing. A developer would have to come forward with a project to actually build housing there. And we don't have anything in the pipeline for that particular property as of now. The another major thing, or the last major thing that the council will be considering, is city council compensation. That will also be discussed at the meeting. The proposed ordinance for this item would increase the pay of city council members from $300 per month to $700 per month. And again, as I stated last time, they don't get any compensation other than that, and for incidental reimbursements, like reimbursement of costs that they incur in connection with their service as a council member. This would not take effect right away. It would not take effect until after the November election, and when the victorious council members from that election are sworn into office. So you can't have current office members give themselves a raise. Anytime that a council increases its pay, it does not go into effect until after the election, even if election's 2 years away. So the main thing I wanted to talk about today, and this is where I'm going to probably get a little bit real with you, a little bit raw emotionally, because this one was a disappointment. And we'll get there, and it has to do with the Senior Center Meal Program. I put a good amount of work into this, and we got some bad news on it yesterday, so I'm going to tell the story, and we'll get there in terms of where we are with it. So the city has contracted, let me just start with a little bit of history. The city has contracted with the Family Services Association, or FSA, since 2006 to provide nutrition services to the senior community of Calimesa. The program is funded through a federal program originally established in the 1960s. The state oversees the program on behalf of the federal government, and the funding is passed through to the County of Riverside, which in turn provides the funding to FSA to administer the city's program. So none of the money that is used for the senior meal program actually comes to the city. We don't actually ever see that money. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, in-person congregate meals were served daily at the senior center, meaning Monday through Friday. The participation in the program fluctuated from year to year, but in the year before the pandemic, participation was very low. It was usually around 10 to 15 people. When the pandemic hit, the program was quickly transformed into a weekly senior meal distribution program. The distribution program consisted of 5 prepackaged meals and other nutritious essentials. Initially, the program drew 70 participants, and that number quickly climbed to 150 per week. And we were getting people from, of course, Calimesa and Yucaipa, Beaumont, Banning, Cherry Valley, and even as far away as Redlands. The program was meant to be a temporary departure from how the program has been administered, and that's a key thing to remember as we go forward here. In fact, the city received communication from FSA in September of 2020 stating that the program was winding down and that the funding would be cut by 15%, reducing the number of seniors we could feed with the program. The city responded by stating we would use CARE Act funds to cover the difference so that we could continue serving all those that were using the program. However, this is an interesting thing. The city was never billed for the difference, yet FSA continued to serve all those that were participating in the meal. So in other words, I think that means that their funding didn't get cut. Meanwhile, the program has grown to over 250 seniors per week currently. And as we reported back to the city council back in November of 2023, we received further communication from FSA stating that the Grab and Go meal program, as it had become to be called, would be discontinued at the end of 2023, and that the senior center would revert to the congregate meal program that existed before the pandemic. So after that council meeting and our senior community started to get wind of that, many were unhappy about it because they preferred the Grab and Go meals. Now, one argument that for the congregate meals is that it does two things. Obviously, it provides nutrition, but it also provides social interaction for the senior community. So you're forced to sit down and maybe socialize, make friends, get out of the house. So it's actually kind of a two-pronged approach to what this program was supposed to do. However, due to the diligent work of our senior center staff, again, they are provided by FSA, they advertised all of the great programs that the senior center had to offer to those that were using the Grab and Go program. And as a result, our senior center has been as busy as it ever has been. And a lot of the patrons from the various programs are there as a direct result of them coming to us because of the Grab and Go meal program. And a lot have said that they would have no other reason to come down here if it weren't for the program. So it is our understanding that the current law that authorizes the program does not allow for a Grab and Go program. It only allows for congregate meals and delivered meals, so such as Meals on Wheels, for example. And as I talked about earlier, the congregate meals were poorly attended. And talking to our seniors that were using the Grab and Go program, few would use the congregate meal program. They're not going to come down to the senior center every day at a predetermined time to eat their meals. So I wrote a letter in December to all of our state, federal, and county elected officials to try to get some help here with this, to draft legislation to allow a grab-and-go option. It was kind of a Hail Mary, to be honest with you. But in February of this year, I was contacted by Assemblyman Greg Wallace's office, which represents Calamasa in the California Assembly. And we worked with his office to draft Assembly Bill 2410. And in April, I traveled to Sacramento to advocate for the bill alongside Assemblymember Wallace at the Assembly Committee on Aging and Long-Term Care. And here is both Assemblymember Wallace's testimony as well as my own.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and members. I'm here today to present Assembly Bill 2410. With rising food costs, it's vital that we provide flexible solutions for our seniors who are vulnerable to food insecurity. The state currently has 2 meal programs for seniors who face food insecurity: the Congregate Meals Program and the Home Delivered Nutrition Program, both administered by the Department of Aging. These meal programs are part of the state's implementation of the Older Americans Act of 1965. During COVID, to protect seniors, many cities provided meals to go rather than congregate, and with this change, they reported serving significantly more seniors. It's important that we take lessons from the pandemic to improve our government services. This bill will continue to provide the to-go option for seniors who are food insecure. Many seniors are required to take prescriptions during meal times, and these schedules can be different than congregate meal schedules. Cities in my district have reported a significant increase in seniors served when they were able to provide meals to go. We should take this lesson and improve our services for seniors. This bill will allow our local food service programs to continue with the flexibility to provide to-go meals that many seniors have come to rely on, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote. With me today is Will Colbo from the City Manager of the City of Calamasa.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Committee on Aging and Long-Term Care. Thank you for allowing me to speak in support of Assembly Bill 2410. My name is Will Colbo, City Manager for the City of Calamasa, a city of approximately 11,000 residents in Riverside County. The COVID-19 pandemic was devastating on many fronts, and it forced both public and private sectors to quickly pivot the way they do business. In this process, we discovered new and innovative ways to deliver services to our residents. The Senior Meal Program at the City of Calamasa Senior Center is an excellent example of the pandemic forcing a change in a program which resulted in something much better than it had existed before. When the pandemic hit, our large senior community, many of which are on fixed incomes, needed alternatives to get their required nutrition. Family Services Association, our senior services provider, instituted a grab-and-go meal program wherein our seniors could pick up, without leaving their vehicle, nutritionally balanced meals that could then be prepared at their convenience. The program now serves over 160 people per week, far exceeding our usual attendance of 10 to 15 for our pre-pandemic congregate meals. Additionally, as our senior center reopened for in-person activity, we've seen great increases in participation for our senior programs, including bingo, arts and crafts, and a very popular Fit After 50. Many of our patrons learned of our new programs as a result of their participation in the grab-and-go meal program, since they would not have otherwise come to our center. The city learned in October that the grab-and-go program would be eliminated as it was only allowed due to the pandemic and is not allowed under current laws governing our meal program. City staff updated the City Council about this in November, and many seniors have expressed great concern about the possibility of the grab-and-go program going away, many of which rely heavily on the program. We appreciate Assemblymember Wallace's efforts in crafting this legislation to allow this critical program for our senior community to continue. I ask the committee to support AB 2410 to provide additional nutrition options for our seniors throughout the state. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So there it was, and that committee did unanimously support the bill. It went on to appropriations because apparently there is a cost associated with this. At least that's what the legislative analyst offices have determined. That also passed through the Assembly Appropriations Committee unanimously, and it was passed 73-0 in the full Assembly. So seems like a pretty big no-brainer, right? And that's even the comment of the chair of the Committee on Aging and Long-Term Care. She said it makes sense. Surprised we're not already doing this kind of thing, so had really good things to say about it. So then, after it goes to the Assembly, it moves to the Senate, and it was passed through the Senate Human Services Committee unanimously. It then moved to the Senate Appropriations Committee, where it was placed on the suspense file. And this is where we knew that we were in a bit of trouble. So what is suspense? So this is an article from Cap Radio that kind of describes, and here's the title of it: Understanding How a California Bill Dies Without Public Debate. So that kind of tells you where this is going. Thousands of bills are introduced in the legislature every year. In 2023, for example, 2,662 were introduced. The bills then go through policy committees, which focus on specialized issues such as business, energy, and health. After passing a policy committee, any piece of legislation with a price tag of more than $150,000 is sent to its respective appropriations committee, which are responsible for deciding which bills to fund. Senate bills are sent to the Senate Appropriations Committee and Assembly bills to the, you guessed it, the Assembly Appropriations Committee. Later in the year, the bills that are passed out of the House in which they are introduced go through the Appropriations Committee in the other chamber as well. Hundreds of bills pile up, suspended in the legislative process, until the suspense file hearing, when the Appropriations Committees decide all at one time which bills get to move on for debate. At the suspense hearing, the Appropriations Chair reads through the list of legislation auctioneer style and announces which bills will live to see another day. The decision-making process is secretive, which we'll talk about in a second. Here's what can happen to each bill. Bills that pass on a roll call vote mean both Republicans and Democrats on the Appropriations Committee voted to move the bill forward. A B roll call means that's an A roll call. A B roll call means the bill passed with support from the majority party, currently the Democrats. Held in committee means the bill will not move to the floor and is dead for the year. In the first half of a 2-year legislative session, appropriations committees can designate 2-year bills. Well, we're already in the second year, so obviously that cannot be done in this case. Appropriations committees can also amend bills before moving them to the floor. In deciding which bills to fund for the year, the appropriations committees also have a similar but separate task from the legislature's budget committees, which decide how much money to attach to an item. So here's the thing. Here's according to Renee Van Vechten, a University of Redlands political science professor, the suspense file was developed as a mechanism for stopping bills, pushing the pause button, and giving legislators a way to consider all the bills that are going to put significant pressure on the budget. So pausing all of the bills in the chamber at the same time allows the lawmakers and legislative leaders to consider the picture holistically in order to weigh priorities. The process also serves as a gatekeeping mechanism, Van Vechten says. If legislators got their way all the time, there would be too many bills that overspend the budget. Well, that already happens, it seems. Mike Gatto, a former lawmaker who served as the chair of the Assembly Appropriations Committee for several years, beginning in 2012, puts it another way. It's a cost-benefit analysis, he said. You are really determining, does this bill do something good and important and worthy? And it is subjective to legislative and committee leaders. California is a bill factory, and the Appropriations Committee is a giant filter. But behind closed doors, the Appropriations Chair, and to some extent the top leaders in each legislative chamber, have final say on which bills pass and which ones are held. And so this is what I didn't understand. When I'm watching the committee hearing and watching all these bills be read, they are read in the alphabetical order of the legislator that proposed them. So Wallace starts with W, so he was one of the last ones that was heard. He had 4 bills on the docket, 3 of which were announced. 1 wasn't. Can you take a guess of which one it was? Correct. AB 2410. And I had to look this article up because I didn't understand how that's determined. And it's determined beforehand, behind closed doors. We have no idea why this bill was not put through. Only that the Appropriations Chair decided that it didn't make the cut for whatever reason. And so that was a punch in the gut, because this happened yesterday. And it was one of over 500 bills on the committee's agenda. And so, but what I don't get is why this was in appropriations to begin with, because this bill was meant to just add a third option to the way existing funds would be spent. In other words, these meal programs get a certain amount of money from the federal government, and then they're divvied up between the counties, and then the counties kind of decide which cities are going to get what. And so it's a finite amount of money. And so by adding the third option, the intent was not to add another program, another layer, so that we can do both. We're still going to get the same amount of money, but we would rather be able to decide, do we want to do in-person meals or do we want to do the grab-and-go meals? Because FSA also runs the senior center in Yucaipa, and I think that's one of the reasons that our congregate meal program isn't as well attended, because people go to Yucaipas. They have a bigger facility, and they have more modern kitchens. So you maybe have the people that want to do the congregate meals, they go to Yucaipa. If they want to do grab and go, they come to Calimesa. Because from my discussions with Yucaipa, they get pretty decent attendance at their congregate meals. So why compete, instead of having competing services in a very, close proximity, let's have complementary services. And that was also another reason that our program could be successful and Yucaipa's could be successful as well. So again, what I'm not sure how appropriations determined that this would actually have a fiscal impact on the state. So that's one of the things that I need to kind of vet out with the assembly member's office, because I think that was that, they actually did some amendments to the bill to try to make that more clear. And so that's something that we're going to discuss with his staff, hopefully next week. But what I will tell you is, city managers and people in this profession, we have a passion for what we do. And I was particularly passionate for this because I know that Calimesa has a large senior community. And I know that this is a successful program. It's one of the most successful things that we do as a city. And so when this came down, it hurt. It really, really hurt. And, in public service, it's not just about the job. It's not just about the 9 to 5. It's a lot. It often is a lot more than that. And so I can tell you that this one, I put a lot of time and effort in and watched this bill, working with the assembly member's office, writing letters, going up and testifying in support of the bill. Everything seemed to be going in the right direction. And then for it to just die unceremoniously was frustrating, and it hurts a lot. And you try not to get personally invested in your work because you want to have your emotions available for your family. But it's hard not to sometimes when you're in public service, and because you're trying to better the lives of people, provide the services that we need to provide. And sometimes, there are debates as to how we do that, and there's not always agreement on how we do that. This is one of those things, though, that I don't think that there was anybody that was against it. Certainly there was nobody in the legislature against it. It did not get a single no vote until it reached the suspense file and then just died. That's the frustrating thing. It was common sense. It was a no-brainer type of bill that, again, I don't understand how it even had a fiscal impact, because it's just taking money that's already budgeted and just being able to spend it in a different way. It's not additional money. I don't get it. And that's the frustrating part. But Assembly members Wallace's, to his credit, he's disappointed. His staff's very disappointed. This is a very high priority for their office, And they really went to bat for us. And I do want to say that I really appreciate their efforts on this and the staff's efforts on this. They really got passionate about this bill as well. Just I could tell in my visit and talking to them. So it certainly is not. It certainly is no through no fault of Assemblymember Wallace or his staff. They did a great job with this, and they're frustrated too, and they're very disappointed too. So again, I can't thank them enough for all of their efforts on this. And but you know what? This is where we kind of pick ourselves up and try again, right? So anyway, I think I've said enough for today. That'll wrap up the podcast. You know, the legislative process can be frustrating, even for us in government. I think that's something that you need to remember. And this is a lesson to all of you, hopefully, that not all government's the same. I think some people say just the government, and we pay too much taxes to the government. And so why can't the government fix my roads? Why can't the government provide me more service, police services, fire services, whatever? Well, again, it's because there's different layers of government, right? And we can only do so much to try to push Sacramento to do things. And we even give them a no-nonsense, easy win type of bill that everyone can be happy with, and they just drop it with no explanation. So it's frustrating, and believe me, we're just as frustrated as any of you are. So just keep that in mind. Reminder, our city council meeting will be this Monday, August 19th, 6 p.m. at the Senior Center. Remember, the public hearing for Oak Valley North will not be taking place on Monday. So if you're listening to this, you'll know, and you won't be disappointed if you show up and it's not being heard. So I just want to let you know it will take place on September 23rd. We will have the stuff from FPPC. I'll figure it out, and then we will go from there. So until next time, I hope you have a great week, and I will talk to you again next Friday. Take care.